So, California Water Plan, we've done these sessions a few times at CWEMF before, so, but this Water Plan Update 2018 is going to be a bit different than the past, and we'll get into a little bit more of that. One thing that we found in going into 2018 is that we've been doing a lot of reactive management in the past, and so this is the one formula that you're going to see in my presentation. You've probably been seeing a lot more today, so this is as complicated as it gets for me. I'm not sure I understand it. But basically that we've been focused on reactive-oriented response to the challenges that we have. So we're out there repairing infrastructure, we're rationing in response to drought, we're regulating to comply with statutes and respond to droughts as well. And that's not really coming out to where we are really managing water sustainably. Now, some of the big picture messages that we have in Update 2018 is that we have to take a long view to really reach that sustainability point. We have to align efforts behind a shared vision, and we'll get into that a little bit more. We have to balance what California's value, and we've actually set up a definition of what those values might be and how to categorize those values as well. And then we need a long-term commitment to that. We need time to do this, and we need commitment to heading in that right direction. And hopefully what you'll see is that we've gotten some framework around that in this update. We have 5 chapters to the water plan. This is going to be different than Update 2013 was a very, multi-volume, very, we call it the encyclopedic type of water plan before. A lot of that content has gone to online materials that we're actually putting on there. So if anybody was familiar, we had resource management strategies, those are up on the web. We have regional reports, those are going to be up on the web as well. But we have 5 chapters. One is the vision and goals for water management sustainability. I got to be mic'd up, huh? Okay. And chapter 2 is a sustainability outlook and kind of goes over the conditions and the assessments, indicators, and metrics of how we define sustainability. Actions for sustainability as well. So this is where we have a 5-year recommended actions and some longer term actions as well, but we actually are focused on the first 5 years of this plan. And then investing in sustainability. This is kind of what we've been calling a funding plan or a finance plan for all these investments that we're suggesting. And then an implementation plan with funding options on how we might go about bringing forth the funding that is needed. Oh, by the way, back there, under 100 pages is the commitment we had made to this thing, and we're sitting at around 77 before front and back matter and everything else, so I think we're actually going to meet that commitment. So in the kind of in chapter 1, we cover the challenges and some key messages under there that we have a lot of challenges threatening Californians' well-being out there. We have a shared vision. We have some bold action and critical challenges there. And we need sustainable and stable funding. One of the things in Update 2013 is we were hearing from all the subject matter experts that there's a number of challenges in whatever field that they're actually involved in. But the common thing we kept hearing time and again is that, well, we don't have the proper funding to do this and stuff. So one of the things we focused on for this water plan is, what type of funding, what are the details on that funding needs, and then where can we potentially actually come up with those funding needs. Again, Californians' values is we need a common aspiration for water sustainability. And a way forward, we need to kind of define that. That's in our chapter 5 as well. We mentioned this in 2013, and we're keeping with that, but we have a tale of two extremes, nothing that anybody in this room probably is not aware of. But this is a timeline showing drought periods and flood periods. So we're either coming in and out of a drought, or we're facing our next flood, and sometimes the same in the same period. So there's challenges that come to the ecosystems and people here, and we're going to be seeing more extreme hydrologic events in the future, increasing flood risk, reduced access to safe, affordable water, changing demands, and declining groundwater levels. These are probably things that you're familiar with. Also declining forest and headwaters health, catastrophic floods, catastrophic wildfires, unstable regional economies. Declining ecosystems is one that we're focusing more on as well. And then infrastructure needs. And the delta is also at risk too. So one of our big takeaways here is that there's some systemic challenges that we're faced with, and they're kind of the root causes for all those other challenges, are how we're addressing these other challenges. And so we're saying that there's some non-coordinated initiatives and actions. We have inflexible and conflicting regulations in places. We don't have capacity for data-driven decision-making, so there's a recommendation or a number of recommendations on how we might invest in more data-driven decision-making. I imagine in this audience we might be supportive of that. Insufficient and unstable funding as well is there. So we need to deal with these root causes, these systemic challenges, before we can actually get to those longer, bigger challenges out there. Said it before, but it takes a long-term view. And this is one of the root things that we have in the water plan, but we have 4 areas of what society values, and we've kind of defined them in these 3 ways. So we define sustainability as the things that Californians value, and so that Californians are protected from health and safety, threats and emergencies. California's economy is healthy, ecosystems in the state are thriving, and we have opportunities for enriching experiences. So my joke usually is that I don't take vacations anymore, I take enriching experiences, but that's kind of along the lines of what we're looking at but it can be cultural practices from your religious practices around water. Tribal has a lot of interest in those kinds of things. I go out paddleboarding on Folsom all the time, so that's kind of my enriching experience around water that takes water to do it. Although when it's low out there, there's no motorboats to compete with, so I have a better experience when they're not out there. So we have 5 goals. So we've kind of gone through some thinking, and we have 5 main goals, and one is in new modernized infrastructure and ecosystems. So we've kind of grouped our goals and objectives and then down to our recommendations in this way. One is infrastructure and restored ecosystems, so we need to invest in those kinds of things. Improve alignments of decisions, initiatives, and actions. Improve regulatory outcomes. Informed adaptive decision-making. And then that funding thing that keeps coming up. It seems like I'm beating on the drum there. So this is kind of an example of some of the objectives under there. So we've also organized them by objective. We have 10 objectives that kind of breaks those down a little bit further. And then we get into some of the recommended actions. And we're basically organizing our efforts in the water plan right now around these actions and looking at actually defining more implementation around those actions as well. So you'll see green and gray infrastructure and a few other things like that are, assessing it and then moving into recharge. One of the things I'll note here is that the early goals are where the big money are. So infrastructure is where you need a lot of money to invest in that kind of stuff. These other objectives and goals coming down below are where you actually build value of those bigger investments. So one of the things we're recommending is more investment first in these kinds of, I'll call them the soft skills, if you will, of things that basically give you better return on investment. Thank you. So, and then these are more, this will all be coming out, by the way. Our water plan is probably going to be coming out mid to late May, the public review draft, and then we're committed to getting the water plan out before the end of 2018 so that we have it out to the new administration before this administration goes out, because that usually we suffer a delay if we cross administrations. So here's some examples of the different actions that we have out here, and this is kind of how we've defined them, what the action is, the context, what our intent is there. And so one of the things that we're really focused on in water plan is kind of what of our intended outcomes of anything that we're trying to do. What's our endpoint that we're trying to reach? And we're trying to really define everything in those terms. And then, of course, the value added and who should be actually involved in this. This gets us into a little bit more of what we need to have in order to, and then the costs, which you'll see a few more numbers on that. But we estimated how much money is needed to invest in each one of these things. There's a requirement for integration that's needed through here, so we'll have to have all these kind of multis here, so multi-sector, discipline, benefit, fund. And so we want to really kind of integrate together on there. So that's kind of something we've always been focused on in the water plan. So here's some little factoids on finance. So getting into that thing, and these are kind of interesting. Whoops. We spend about $2 billion a year on water management right now. That's the state's investment in there. That's about less than 2% of the state general fund is on water right now. The total investment need, when we total up all the needs that we did a lot of gathering of information from different entities. This is both local investment and state investment. There's a need of about 350 billion needs over 50 years. That's $350 billion. That's a lot of money, I would say, but it really isn't when you look at the total of what we support. The local and regional entities provide about 80% of that investment, so the state is a small player in this world. And the historical investment is not informed or balanced based on those values, so we're trying to change that dynamic in the water plan. So you noted those goals and objectives we had, and then we started estimating what the cost is to implement those. So so the state funding investment that we're seeing is about $93 billion over 50 years. So it's a small percentage of the total, or a smaller percentage of the total. And then even of that, 85 is intended for local and regional activities. So we're passing that through to incentivize actions at local and regional scales. To give this here is, a graphic that's underway right now, but what we're trying to show is most of this capital investment is in here. This is O&M investment. And those soft skills that I was talking about, that's those early investments that might, affect how to invest in those higher cost ones. That's the point of this chart here. Again, here's our funding. We kind of ramp up. The point of this is that we're ramping up over the time, and we're also saying this is the percentage increase over our historical state funding that we've been doing. So it's an increase of that $2 billion a year that we're approximately spending now on average. We're expecting to see a little bit higher investment in that. And then in the chapter 4, we go into, or I guess it's 4 and 5, but we look at a couple of funding options. We went through some scenario analysis of different funding options, and 2 of them made more sense, but it's beyond our pay grade to basically make a final recommendation. But we said there's some things that, one of the things we call is novel mechanisms So we're saying keep all the current mechanisms at maximum historical levels, general fund, bond funds, and then novel mechanisms are things like fees and that kind of stuff, or a tax or assessment. So if you saw about an $8 per month per household above the federal, for those above the federal poverty level, or about $3 per capita is needed to do that one. And then to replace the novel mechanisms, we could go to the state general fund to do that if we didn't go to those kind of fees and things. And we would see that we would have a 5-time increase in the state general fund. But remember, it's only about 2 to 3% of the general fund right now, so we could probably see that. So, some other numbers that we came up with on the impact of these different scenarios on who would be actually paying for those kind of dollars and what the kind of impact it is. We need to balance. Okay, I'll go back to that one. Okay. Those are those 4 societal values that we have there. We're kind of showing those 4 societal values, also considering equity as the center of things as well. So we're looking at how we're balancing those things. So the future is going to see how do we dynamically balance those values. It's a good thing to have because I've been in rooms where people who are very focused on floods or whatever say safety is where it's at, and therefore all the funding should be going towards safety. But we're saying that we need to keep in consideration all societal values there as well. And this is kind of how we've broken down those. Public health and safety is one example. This would be an outcome that we might see, and this is an indicator that we might see. We plan to keep on doing this kind of thing, so we implement actions, adapt. This is our, the typical thing you see of learning and adapting here. Tracking, acting, adapting, and acting again. Planning. Sustainability takes time. If you're the good egg or the bad egg, I guess, I think. By the way, these aren't my slides, so I'm kind of riffing on them right now. But so the other part about this, though, the point is it takes time to implement this to get to it. So sustainability, again, is not an endpoint. We're going to get better, and the loops are getting larger as we're moving forward, so we're getting more and more sustainable, closer to that. But our values basically change over time, so there is no real endpoint. And once you've achieved something in one place, you might start putting your values in someplace else. Again, here's the implementation and funding schedule. We've got some details. We'll skip over that quickly. The way forward, basically, things that I will note on this, I don't think I have too much time, but we'll have a annual report that we're out there. I mentioned that we're a little delayed we have a plan that's before our administration right now being reviewed, and the administration wanted more time to consider it. I take that as a message that we've kind of hit on the right subjects, but it's kind of, they wanted more time to consider the implications of the water plan. So maybe we're getting a little bit more, it scares a few people maybe that we have, we're actually recommending things. That annual report could actually focus attention on what we're not doing, which might be uncomfortable for some folks. And that's it.